Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome back here. Gather over the DC booth because you are in for a very rare treat to see how comic books are really made and constructed. This is the DC Art Academy, and we have one of our most illustrious teachers, probably the most illustrious color artist in the business today. I guarantee if you haven't realized it from the credits and seeing his name a million times in comics like Hush or in right now, we're calling the Superman Year One, right? Yeah. This man has definitely colored your visions of superhero dreams. So without any further ado, everyone gather around. Welcome Alex Sinclair to the stage, who's going to guide you into the world of digital color. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'm going to use Alex's appearance to plug one of the greatest comic book companies of all time that's now part of our imprint here. But Alex, you got started with Wildstorm.
I did.
But even before it was Wildstorm, right?
Before Wildstorm, it was called Homage Studios.
Yeah.
Jim hadn't named his studio yet, and he had a talent search in one of his comics, and they were looking for writers, pencilers, inkers, colorists, letterers, everybody.
Right.
And at that time, the strongest part of my portfolio was colors.
Yeah.
I just made a conscious decision, I'm just going to send color.
Right, because the way I've read the story before is that you would go and you would show your work, and you had good pencils and good inks and color, and they would come back and say, this needs work, but your color's fantastic.
Yes.
So in a weird way, you should be applauded because you listen to the critics, but only enough to say, I need to focus where my strengths are.
Correct.
Right, but you're also still an accomplished artist and everything else. So
I think you have to be. All of the great inkers and colorists have that strong artistic base that you need to be able to work in this industry.
And I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about that, but what we're going to start on today is we're going to do an image. You're going to do a cover, is that right?
Yes, this is the cover to Superman Year One, number 3. Yes.
So we're getting ahead here. They haven't seen this.
A little bit. They've actually shown this already.
In solicitations?
They haven't shown us the process of it, and so this is we're going to try and figure out. Going to talk to my thought process of what I go through in the cover, what I think through and do in it. Usually at home I work on a desktop computer. I work with a Macintosh, an iMac, and a Wacom Cintiq, which is a digital.
Are you able to switch up between like that and a personal, and other machines? Or are you always staying at the same workstation?
At home, I just do the workstation. I think my computer's in my office, and when I step out of there, it's my house.
Right. So that's where you break away.
I try and keep work at work and home at home.
And you probably have all your presets and everything else already.
Yes.
The thing.
Yes.
So,
it's a lot faster than this, and the settings are something that I've done for so many years that I know exactly what I'm looking at is going to print that way on paper.
Well, let's start with the beginning of the process. So you've gotten the art, and you've been able to work with some of the greatest artists in the history of the business.
Yes.
So the first thing is probably a little awe and excitement at the piece that you're looking at.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I feed off of the energy of the art and with each page and each cover. And before I start each series, trying to also establish a look for it or a feel for it. With Year One, since it's a retelling of Superman's history, I wanted to go very organic with it, so a very watercolor feel, and it plays to the strengths of John and Danny's art as well, since it's so. There's some great spotted blacks, and there's some gigantic open spaces.
Right.
I wanted those spaces to feel like there was more than just color there, but there's a texture to it. There's a
There's like from the ones I've seen so far, there is an earthy tone to the work.
Yes.
Now, when you're first getting that and you're getting those kind of color choices, do you think about what it's going to the size? I mean, these are odd-sized books. That open up some stuff for you?
Yeah, it definitely gave me more of a canvas to paint on, but it also created each page was larger than it used to be. So some of the hurdles were it's a larger image, larger resolution, so my computer was working slower.
Right. And more of it's going to show. So when you're doing a cover, I think it's a little different than when you're doing an interior panel.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yeah. So and when you work with covers instead of interior pages, you tend to cheat things a little bit because you definitely want that image to pop off the stands. Where within the book itself, you want to tell a story, so you limit your palettes to help tell that story.
Right. And I want to talk to you about that, but okay, so here we are. We've gotten the image.
Right, so when I get a page, it's black and white. It's either on paper and I scan it, or they send me the scan. We work at around 600 DPI and at least image size. So if the book is 10 by 7, we go 10 by 7 at 600 DPI, and that ensures that the inks are going to print nice and crisp, and then the color reproduction is going to be fairly close to what we're seeing on the screen. The first step that I do is called flatting, and that's really just going through and selecting each item and filling it with a flat color with what you're seeing right here. It's the most it's probably the most boring part of the coloring process, but I take advantage of it, especially with covers. As I'm flatting something, I'm thinking through what I'm going to do with it. At this point, I'm kind of thinking, all right, well, I'm reading the art, seeing where the shadows are coming from, the light's coming from, all that stuff, so that once I'm done with the flatting stage, I can just jump right in and start rendering. For the interiors of a book, I actually hire people to do the flatting for me.
Okay.
I average about an hour a page.
Right.
And if each book is 22 pages, I'm saving myself about 22 hours worth of work by having someone else do the flatting. So that as I'm coloring page 1, my flatter is ideally 6-7 pages ahead of me. So I'm never really slowing down the process.
Now, I read also that you would start a project by taking like a 2-page part of an interior and testing out your palette choices on something like that?
Yeah, doing the equivalent of what you would do like to sketch. If you're going to draw Superman, you've never drawn him before, you want to sketch him out to kind of get a feel for what works with the face, the nose, the spit curl, all that stuff. Yeah. I do that in color. So I take a page and I just slap color really just clumsily to see if that's going to work, and then I'll zoom in and do detailed texture work in areas to see if that's going to work with the art too. And then I'll just jump right in.
Now, you choose palettes for scenes. You choose different palettes based on the work and the character.
Yes.
Can you give them a better definition of what a palette is and what you mean by that?
So for palette is how many colors you're using, right? So if you're going to be outside in the sunlight in the park, you're going to use a ton of color. But you want to have one unifying color that kind of binds them together, so that as you jump from that panel to that next panel and that same set of colors or palette appears, you know that you're in that same sequence. Right. And then if you jump from that to, say, a flashback sequence, and you flip the palette and you go with a very monochromatic, like sepia tones, it immediately gives you a visual cue that something's changed, something's different in the story, and that's part of the storytelling, where you're going linear with the story, and then all of a sudden you switch palettes to give the reader a cue visually that, okay, we've changed something here. Yeah,
and if it works, it takes you where you want them to go, and they don't notice that they've been taken there.
Right.
It's a subtle guiding principle that leads you through.
Correct.
Now, you choose complementary colors. You're getting these things to the scenes. Did you study color theory early on, or was it just an experience, a bit of knowledge you
So as
came
part
across?
of my I have a studio art degree from college, and part of the curriculum was color theory, and it was a very extensive course that I took, which I loved, and clearly it helped me.
And now these people can have access to pro-level tools, but they should go out and get versed in classical color theory.
And I'm sure there's video tutorials on YouTube or elsewhere about color theory, but there are courses that you can take, and there's also some people offer courses for specific to coloring and all that stuff, because there's not one specific method of doing it. It's like math. We can have a problem, and you can solve it one way, and I can solve it a different way, and we all both get the same result. It's the same with art. It's the same with digital coloring. There's different methods. As long as you get a good result, it doesn't matter how you get there.
No, exactly. You can go any way, and as long as you get there, and it's the seamlessness of it all that matters.
Yep.
All right, so I don't want you to know what your next step is.
I'm working on an iPad now. It's easier. In the past, I would have to set up a laptop and a Cintiq and a plug and a this and that. And the beauty of now with the iPad is this is what I use when I travel. It allows me to do about 99% of what I do digitally on my desktop here, and then I just transfer back to ensure that everything
Which was amazing. When you started, you never thought that would be possible.
No, that's great. The beauty of working digitally, too, is I can zoom in and out as much as I want. All right, and so my first step is going to be selecting what I'm going to paint first. And let's go. We're going to start with Superman. All right, I'm going to grab this selecting tool. I'm going to select the flesh tones, and then go straight to painting. I always start with the actual color for each character, and I have in my swatches palette already selected like different colors that are specific to each character. Okay. So like his flesh tone is already mixed for me, and I just easily click it and drop it in to help me color faster. But what I am going to do is I'm actually going to in reading the art, I'm going to wash this with a little bit of blue, since that strong, warm light source is behind them.
Yeah.
Everything that is on the opposite side is going to be a cool color, that contrasting temperature.
Okay.
As opposed to color. And
So by making the other stuff cooler, you make him warmer.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm going to wash him a little bit. I can adjust the opacity and the size of the brush. And then very lightly start to wash the skin. And you can see just by adding a little bit of that blue,
Yeah.
it's starting to contrast with that background quite a bit. All right, and I'm going to switch brushes. This one is a really soft edge brush, and I like to work with these harder brushes. That allow me to brush in some details of the shading. And just really cutting the shadows based on what knowledge of anatomy comes into play,
Right.
and how light will behave depending on its light, its source, and the different.
That's, there's just no escaping a need for knowledge of anatomy when it comes, right?
Superheroes are like the ultimate
Yeah.
anatomical the ideal. So, early on.
Who were yours growing up? I mean, you obviously were a fan. You did comic books with your brother, is that right?
Yeah, my brother and I used to, we would buy the comics and then we'd draw the ones we liked. We would
redo them.
Pages, and it was, he's probably one of the main reasons I love comics is I just kind of fed off of his energy.
Is he an older brother or younger brother?
Older brother.
Okay, so that's why he made you do the coloring, right?
That's right. That's right.
I was going to say, that seemed like an older brother idea. You should finish this up for me.
We would both draw with both ink. I would color.
All right, so we only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to let you do some more of your
I'm going to go real
work
quick here as fast as I can with this. The different modes allow me to paint in different. Screen will help me bleach a color a little bit. Add will do the same, and it'll help me do it at a faster.
So you could be adding in some pieces and subtracting others from certain colors. And
correct. And I'm going to just kind of come in and start adding some of these highlights from this light that's coming from behind him, but it still catches the edge of each part of his body.
When did you realize that there were colorists in comics and that this was a path that it was available?
I started noticing it as I was showing my portfolio around that I really noticed color.
Okay.
And how good colorists could really add to the art, and the not so good colorists really were detracting from it.
Yeah.
And it took me back to the stuff that I did with my brother. It's like, well, I think I can do this, and so I started creating color samples as well, thinking, hey, maybe that's my thing.
Right.
And it turns out it was.
It turns out it was. In a really, really big way for the benefit of all of us, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier to list the comics that you've not worked on than it is to list the ones that you have. And they're all routinely excellent, even my beloved Aerosmith. So
yes.
I love that. Yeah. I just wanted to get a shout out because if you don't know that comic, you should get that comic. That's something else.
I mean, it's people ask me which character would you love to do that you haven't done. It's like I think I just ran out of DC characters.
Well, right. I mean, because we kept challenging you to go well, you've done everything else so excellent. What else can't you do? And once you start talking with the big characters, they all intersect. So eventually, with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, or someone will show up. And
Yep. And I'm going to do a quick thing here with different texture brushes that I use at different sizes and opacities. This is how I bring in and mimic certain textures that look like it's a watercolor brush.
Wow.
And things like that. And I'll use different colors and switch. Again, the blending modes are what really going to help me accentuate what's going on with this stuff. Let's go a little bit stronger here.
And each of these go down as layers, is that right? If you go back in, you can...
Technically, yes. I work on one layer for the most part initially, so I do the initial rendering in one layer, and then I'll add additional layers to add special effects, because I don't want to mess with the line art at all initially, and then once I'm done with that, then I'll go ahead and add that.
Well, I just think it shows a lot of trust in your choices, that you're making choices fast and quick, and you believe in the choices you're making. You're not going to go back and pick apart little pieces of it. You're feeling it develop. So.
Yes. Yeah. All right, so we're going to cheat a little bit and jump ahead here. And I'll show you what the rendered piece would look like. And so some of the steps that I've gone through is this is what it looks like when I'm done with it. I've rendered through with the different textures, added some weathering to the sphere to look like it's been put through the ringer. And then I wanted to play with the drop shadow off of that.
Wow.
So I made a selection and dropped it in on a separate layer, and this is when I start to add the layers.
I just think of all the Golden Age comics I've read, and that there's some artists that would have killed to have you be able to do some of this stuff for them.
I would have loved to do it as well. And then here's the special effects stuff. What I really want to pop that light from behind him. So I've added that strong yellow light that creates like that soft glow around him. And then I came in with like a little bit of an orange one that makes it a little more saturated. It pops a little bit more. And then the last few things are little kind of trails of dust that are coming off the different parts of the planet, just to give it a little more atmosphere, more realism, and that's.
And again, you know, this, as you can see, everybody, these are effects that he's putting in, and your eye picks them up, and they feel an integral part of the image. So it's amazing. Last thing I want to ask is, do you have any advice to people who are aspiring to follow down the path of coloring?
Sure. I mean, with coloring, definitely color theory. Also study the people whose work you like. Every artist develops their own style by borrowing from the artist that they like. So it's not like I color just like Joe Chido, but he has a great influence of my work. But I studied Mark Chiarello and Lynn Varley and Adrian Roy, and all those put together, I take little bits from every one of them, and that's how I created my own style. So that when any artist asks me for advice, it's whether it's a colorist, a pencil, or an inker, is study those whose work you admire, and try and mimic what they do, not so that you copy them, but take what you like from them that works for you, and then from the other artists that you like, and that's how you develop your own style.
Now, I hope you listened to all of those colorist names. We had Varley, Chiato, Mike Chiarillo, and Adrian Roy, who worked on and was credited on more Batman issues than anybody but Bob Kane. Maybe she did more, but okay. But I will just say that you really need to understand the power of color in these images. Respect the letterers, respect the color artists, because you feel it when they don't hit. And when they do, and it's seamless, it just, I mean, you can just see how much more power is in this image based on this color. So,
thank you.
This is one of the all-time greats. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Alex Sinclair.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving up your valuable time to come out here and teach the wonderful world of color.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.